and we're just going to have a chat now about the X-Case legislation bill. So first of all, Claire, can you just tell us what is the X-Case legislation bill? What is it that you want to change about it?
Yeah, it's a good question, because actually a lot of people now and a lot of young people wouldn't even know what the X-Case was, but it was essentially an enormous issue. In 1992, the state moved to effectively intern a young girl, 14 years of age, who was made pregnant by rape. Her parents had taken her to England for an abortion, and they contacted the state to say, well, look, can we get the fetus DNA tested? And they said, hang on a minute, you shouldn't even be over there, bring her back. So it was like basically imprisoning a child who'd been raped in Ireland, and there was a massive outcry at the time. People totally objected, said this is just a ludicrous situation, and people should have the right to travel, the right to abortion information, and the Supreme Court intervened and said that where the life of a woman, as this child's was because she was suicidal, the life of a woman was in danger, that there should be a right to abortion in Ireland. The problem has been that in the intervening 20 years, the government and successive 6 governments have done absolutely nothing to give legislation to allow doctors to perform an abortion in those circumstances, which means that the European Court of Justice has said that no such abortions they have found have been carried out in Ireland. Ridiculous. And very, very sick women are being forced to travel to England to get treatment.
It's shocking that in this day and age, it's like the government hasn't moved forward with the rest of it, so it hasn't evolved into this. Like, I know that there was a lot of talk about, us as a Catholic nation, that, that we weren't, this was never something that we were supposed to be doing. But I think it's very much the dark ages that they're still talking.
Look, I mean, they talk about how Irish society has moved on, the days of the Magdalen laundries and people's children being taken off them and all of that, that those days are behind us, and for ordinary people in society they are. But the government and politicians have lagged so far behind that, and it's very much a totally hypocritical attitude. Oh, we'll pretend abortion doesn't exist. Abortion exists, it just doesn't take place in Ireland. Irish women, thousands of them, every year have to travel. In these days now of austerity, it means that people who are unemployed, people on low incomes, those people are the ones who can't travel. People who have vulnerable status, refugee status or asylum status here also can't avail of such treatment, so they're being disproportionately affected. But if you have money, off you go, you can go anywhere. I'm not saying it's an easy choice for anybody, obviously, but it is disproportionately affecting poor people.
But it seems to be the way that it works across the board now. If you've got money, you'll be grand. If you don't, we're just going to forget you're there.
Absolutely, it's horrendous. Look, I mean, for all sorts of very different reasons, many women have to make the difficult choice to decide not to go ahead with their pregnancy. I mean, where a woman's life is at risk, is hardly radical to say that they should avail of medical treatment in those circumstances, and that's what's been sought, and it's carried out as a medical procedure in so many countries already. This obviously we thought it was very useful to move the bill because it allowed discussion probably in a calmer and more balanced way than has ever taken place. It was actually the first proactive moving of legislation to deal with this very complex and emotive issue, and we thought it was handled really well. We had 3 hours of Dole debate on it, where a lot of people had to recognise that this was something that we'd failed to deal with. It was a blow to women, and that it had to be dealt with pretty soon. So, I mean, the legislation wasn't passed. That's partly because of the sort of peculiar system we have where parties whip their people into line. So a lot of what people were saying was quite positive, but the vote went against it.
It's going to take a little bit longer.
Well, you see, we've been brought to book or called to account by the European Court of Human Rights. Ireland has been deemed to have violated the human rights of people by not allowing people access safe abortion where their lives are threatened here. You've had people who've had to, who are cancer victims and so on, being denied chemotherapy in Ireland because it might harm the fetus and so on. Ridiculous carry on. So Europe has said
nearly causing that's like nearly murder.
Well, it's just basically saying or off you go, travel to England. I mean, it's just ludicrous, and I think the debate did serve to bring the issue out into the open. I mean, it was as a result of the legislation going forward in a non-critical way that a number of women came together, came out for the first time and identified themselves as, mothers or, women with names, with families, and say we had an abortion. And I think it really caught people's attention and made a lot of people
It's
wake up,
harder
you
to
know.
ignore it when
Yeah.
you're looking someone in
Absolutely,
the eye who's
when-
telling you their story. Like, it's much harder to
look,
ignore.
the sort of Catholic thinking and the right-wing brigade who try and whip this up would have you thinking that women and girls use abortion as a handy contraceptive, which is
But
ludicrous.
this is the
you know.
fornication is
Yeah, I know.
I mean, now, in fairness, like,
It was the lightest part of the debate. We nearly hit the deck.
I
when we
actually
heard
couldn't
that, you know.
believe
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
people who represent us in the Dáil who would actually still be thinking in that absolutely.
Well, we couldn't
ludicrous
either. We
way.
thought we misheard first. Like, we were kind of going, could this really be? But I mean, we didn't actually even know what the word meant. We thought that this was some lunatic sort of saying, oh, you couldn't have sex for pleasure, that sex was only there for procreation,
Oh,
and
yeah.
anything that stood in the way. But then when it actually means that it means sex between people who aren't married, I mean, you know, over a third of children born in the state are born to people who aren't married. The idea that that's the biggest cause of unwanted pregnancies is absolutely
But this is it, like,
ludicrous.
again, it's so far
Yeah, yeah.
removed from the reality that people are living these
Dreadful.
days. It's
Well,
just,
thankfully that was a minority view, like, you know,
Thank
it was
God.
where I'd say even people in Fine Gael were mortified over that, like, you know, but ridiculous stuff. I mean, the feedback we got, the response we got was overwhelming. I mean, there was a group of very kind people doing a novena outside the Dáil for us, but there was only about 60 of them, average age about 95, whereas the feedback from ordinary people across the board, actually nearly equal men and women,
Yeah.
for saying fair play, you've given us a voice, thanks for acknowledging that we exist.
And it's making people think
Oh,
about it. It's bringing
unbelievable.
it back into play that it's consciously on people's minds now, and they have to, you know, they have to talk about these women, as we were saying, the four ladies who were on the Late Late Show the other night.
Absolutely.
That has touched a lot of people, just because again, it's harder to ignore when you're looking at someone.
Well, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, these women, and people may not have heard their story, but these women were actually, they were pregnancies, they were wanted pregnancies, planned pregnancies in the main, and they found out in some cases nearly halfway through the pregnancy that there was a serious fetal abnormality that would result in the fetus, if it was born, it would die within hours of being born. And the only thing their doctors could do to them was say, no, you've got to carry this to full term. If
Who
it
are you
dies,
to
if it
tell-
dies inside you, you still, until you go into labour or whatever, you're going to have to continue with that pregnancy. And as the women said, with everybody congratulating you, saying when are you due,
It's
all
horrific,
that sort of
like,
thing.
and to have, I mean, when you know that that's the inevitable result.
Absolutely.
You know, who are you to say that I have to carry
So
this
you're
baby to
dealing with
full
the
term?
grief,
Like,
the
it's-
loss, and then you've got to go around like that for months later. Barbaric.
It
so the
is
doctors
barbaric.
would say,
It's-
well, look, you'll have to go to England then. And I mean, particularly now with, you know, some of the couples, it cost them thousands of euros to go over, to travel, to organise it. And what they said was the biggest, most hurtful thing. I mean, life has loads of disappointments and tragedies for a lot of people.
Yeah.
We all have to deal with them. People know that, you know, death and grief and bereavement is part of life. But to be banished from your own country, to have to go and get treatment and not be able to talk about it when you come back, it's just, it is the dark ages.
It is completely, like,
that's
weird.
going back to the Magdalene laundries and you know,
where
bury your
we haven't
heads, you
even
know,
come
yeah,
any
yeah.
further. If that's the way that we're going to treat
Crazy.
the people in our country, that we are going to
But
banish
the really
them.
heartening thing is the positive feedback. People
Yeah.
saying it's great. We know that the women who have to make these decisions are ourselves, our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our
Yeah.
wives, our partners, and for all sorts of valid reasons. None of them easy, but people should be supported. That's all society can do, is support people in decision making, not, you know, outcast them or whatever. It's all about control. Or it
Yeah,
was
they
there
shouldn't be made
because
felt
of
like
control,
criminals for
you
doing
know.
something like
ridiculous.
it.
You know,
It's-
it really is about people having the right to control their own bodies, dictate their own fate, and really society should be in a supporting role to that. So, I mean, the positive was it's hugely brought the issue on, and everybody was really appreciative that it was raised, and well, not almost everyone, in a balanced way. I actually even got a really nice letter from a Church of Ireland bishop in Kilkenny,
Wow.
saying fair play. He said that politics in Ireland is sort of nearly full of people. It's systemic spinelessness,
Yeah.
which means nobody willing to challenge anything or say anything different. He said these issues have to be raised.
They
and
have
it's
to be raised,
Great,
yeah.
and so many people saying, don't step back from that now, go on and push it further. And there is an expert group set up by the government as a result of the European human rights case against Ireland. They have to issue findings in July. A lot of the Labour Party deputies hid behind that group and said, oh, we agree with you, but we'll wait until the expert group, which was a bit of a fudge.
That's a bit of a cop-out now. in fairness,
Absolutely,
like.
when it was their policy, and they came
Yeah.
up to us afterwards saying fair play. You know, when that was their that was their stated policy for years. Many people had been active with them, thinking that if we voted Labour, it would advance the sort of social agenda, and there's no way they would have pushed that. So when we've made it harder now for them. When the expert group come out, they can't. We think they have to legislate, at least for the X case, and they'll have to come up with broader provision as well. So we want to continue on now, and with all the people who've been in touch with us, go forward for broader legislative change now, and I think that's certainly what's on the cards.
And that's great, Claire. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. It really, really has, and I'm so glad. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm so glad to see that there's people who are actually representing the people in the Dáil. It's great to see. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.
Keep up all the hard work.
Will do.